though. I don't want it. I've always had to struggle and fight, and that's made me strong. It's made me who I am.
Fire, an aggressive element. It represents breath, life, but also has the potential to destroy. For some, their fire is fueled by tranquility. For others, desire. But for many, their fire is fueled by unquellable rage. Whether you're aware of it or not, anger in some way fuels us all. Some try to suppress it, others are consumed by it. But only the truly capable can control it. If you're one of the former two, don't worry. You too can learn to become the latter, much like our very own Prince Zuko of the Fire Nation.
You've always thrown everything you could at me. Well, I can take it, and now I can give it back! Come on! Strike me! You've never held back before!
Zuko was a good-hearted kid. He didn't want to hurt anyone or become the vengeful guy that he eventually became. All he wanted was the love and support of his family, but he had to compete for it, always living in the shadow of his younger sister, Azula. Zuko had to work 10 times harder to get basic thing that he, as well as everyone else, were entitled to: love, peace, and happiness. But the world was against him. After the disappearance of their mother, Zuko was pushed to the side, and Azula became the de facto favorite. Now being forced to try even harder to be accepted by his father, Zuko became fueled by jealousy, which over time became the rage we know today. It was this rage that drove him. It drove him on his months-long quest to capture the Avatar, to gain back the honor of his nation, and to redeem himself in the eyes of his father. Once he achieved those things, however, he still wasn't happy. In fact, he was angrier than ever, because for a long time, anger was all that he had known. He rarely felt any emotion other than raw indignation, because every time he did, it blew up in his face, sometimes literally. So as a survival mechanism, Zuko indirectly suppressed all other emotions and was fully consumed by anger and hate. Hate for his sister, hate for his father, hate for his failures, but most importantly, hate for himself. Zuko grew to hate what he had become, an uncaring, ruthless, selfish shell of his former self. He never wanted this for himself, but was forced into this life by a series of unfortunate circumstances. His anger had only taken him to a place of negativity, so it was time for him to reevaluate his ambitions.
Who are you angry at?
Answer the question, Zuko. Talk to us.
Come on, answer the question.
Come on, answer it.
I'm angry at myself!
It took a lot of self-reflection, but Zuko eventually realized that he needed a new goal in life. This goal was to help defeat those who had wronged him, to create the world he had wanted since he was a kid. But the only way to do this was not to act on his anger, but rather in spite of it. A wise green man once said, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." Zuko needed to rid himself of the ones he had feared, the ones whose actions had made him angry in the first place, so that same anger and fear would never haunt him again. Instead of fighting to satisfy his rage, he chose to fight against it, against the fear, and instead fought on the side of peace and the world he aspired to live in. He needed to focus less on being angry at how things are or how they were in the past, and more on hoping that things would get better. It was hope that brought him out of this state of blind fury and caused him to see clearly, or at least to try to. Hope eventually wasn't enough if he were to help the Avatar. He needed to use that hope, created in spite of his anger, to breathe new hope into his new comrades.
Zuko, you have to look within yourself to save yourself from your other self. Only then will your true self reveal itself.
If you want to learn to channel your anger like Zuko, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what am I angry about? And trace it back, all the way back. A lot of times people will become enraged over something minor and it will stick with them for the rest of the day, maybe even longer, to the point where they don't even know what they're mad about anymore. If you find yourself in this scenario, think back to what first ticked you off. Logic always trumps anger, so the first thing to consider when thinking about what initially angered you is what about it made you mad. We all have the right to be angry, but it's a matter of if that anger is really justified given the circumstances. For example, if someone corrects you in a condescending manner and that makes you angry, think about if the energy you're using to be mad about it is really worth it. The person who is being condescending may not have done so on purpose, maybe it's just in their nature, or perhaps the way in which they said it didn't match what they were actually thinking. If it doesn't affect your life in any significant way, then it's probably best not to waste any more negative thoughts on it. Zuko's anger, on the other hand, is very much justified because it had a very profound impact on his life. He was constantly angry, and it was what kept him going for years, and being constantly bombarded by angry, negative thoughts will make it harder and harder to have positive ones, which is why even when your anger is justified, it's healthy to make the best of the situation. Don't let it faze you, because once it gets to you, it becomes increasingly more difficult to get rid of. Do as Zuko did during his return as prince. Fake it till you make it. While he was legitimately happy for a while, it didn't last. But this brief time of genuine happiness was what opened the floodgates for Zuko to start being more open-minded and more positive. After making the decision to leave the Fire Nation and join Aang, he unknowingly did many things that combat anger, such as communicating his thoughts to others, entirely changing his environment, resorting to humor, and making conscious efforts to right his wrongs, ultimately resulting in his new, positive outlook on life. His anger still remains, but is no longer the dominant emotion at play.
You're going to fail a lot before things work out.
That's supposed to make me feel better?
Even though you'll probably fail over and over and over again.
Seriously, not helping.
You have to try every time. You can't quit because you're afraid you might fail.
After being consumed by rage for so long, it's not always as easy to turn it around as we'd all like it to be. When animosity is all you know, how can you possibly hope to be more than that? Every time Zuko tried this, he was pushed back even harder to the starting point, leaving him more afraid and more furious than ever. The way he got past this? Keep trying. When you're angry, it may seem like you'll never feel anything other than that. So while it may be hard to break free of that mindset, you have to keep trying. You may not succeed at controlling your anger every time, but every time you try, you get a little better at it. Eventually, you'll be able to do it without thinking, but first, you have to try.